Okay, I gotta read these questions real quick.
We're live.
Well, hello and welcome everyone to Sunshine Cathedral Christians and Cocktails. Thank you for joining us here at the Sunshine Cathedral programming as we continue to become known as America's Queer Church for All. So we are glad that you are taking time to be with us this evening, and we hope that you have already prepared your cocktail in hand and are ready for an exciting panel discussion this evening. Just a wave of quick announcements. We are, of course, broadcasting live, so anything can happen. We have learned this in the past, and we just know better to predict anything, but we're live, and so we're glad you're with us. Of course, as a reminder, Monday through Saturday, we have midday prayer at noon. We invite you to join us. Of course, on Mondays evenings at 6 p.m., that's Christians and Cocktails. On Wednesday, it is Share in the Chair, and this coming Wednesday is another one, someone that you don't want to miss, is Reverend Kip Cherich. Kip has been around a long time doing advocacy work and just all kind of queer rights stuff in her clergy history. And I won't say too much about her, but just enough to say you don't want to miss this Share in the Chair again this coming Wednesday at 6 p.m. Yes, Kip Cherich. You don't want to miss her, and just going to be a wonderful discussion with our senior minister and her as well. And then, of course, on Sunday mornings, we broadcast live at 10:30 a.m. On Facebook as well as YouTube. And, of course, you can join us for in-the-room worship at 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. And just as you do, go to the Cathedral website and make a reservation. And there are some ways that we explain on the website about how you do get to worship with us. And we invite you to do that. But for now, we are here, glasses in hand, ready to begin this evening discussion. And I'm going to come up with the new rule for this evening that we were just chatting about a little bit, that every time you hear the word Sunshine Cathedral, you have to take a sip of whatever you're drinking. So here's the Sunshine Cathedral.
I'm drinking that.
All right, Darrell, it's all yours.
Well, first of all, I need to point out that you forgot Sunshine Cathedral's thought on Saturday morning at 12:30. Yes, of all the things that we offer, we also offer at Sunshine Cathedral. Just a thought.
Okay, this may be a case of do as I say, but not as I do. So, or don't do as I do, whatever that might be at this point. Okay.
Between me and Cindy Lippert, usually on metaphysical topics. Okay, that's that. Now, it's the home team, the standard players, Danito and, Tara and Sam. They are artists in residence at the Sunshine Cathedral.
Wow, Tara's up with this. She is on it.
It was my idea.
Yes, it was.
Reverend Dr. Robert Griffin, our executive minister, my husband. There is Reverend Margarita Rodriguez, minister of spiritual companionship. She teaches A Course in Miracles. She offers spiritual direction and spiritual companionship. And she's a regular on Christians and Cocktails. And then we sometimes have a guest panelist that's always done very well. We've had a guest panelist. And tonight's guest panelist is Kevin Conkle. Now, this is not just some rando who happened onto the screen who got the code and busted in. He was invited to be here because you may not know this about Kevin. Kevin lives out of the area. He lives in the Naples area. And when the world was open and you could go places and be part of things, he would drive from Naples to Sunshine Cathedral. He would drive to Fort Lauderdale for worship. Sometimes bring his family, sometimes bring his husband, and it's about over an hour and a half drive. Very, very, very faithful. Well, the reason, of course, he's so religiously faithful is it is literally in his blood. It's in his bones. He was a Pentecostal minister. I'm not talking about Church of God. I'm not saying Assemblies of God. I'm not saying Church of God Prophecy. I mean Oneness Pentecostal, Baptized Jesus Name Only Pentecostal. Right. I'm Pentecostal is what he means. And
the stomp it down kind.
Shonda.
He was a Pentecostal minister for about 7 years. He pastored a church in Indiana. And then he was the assistant or associate or something, general supervisor or general poobah, bishop, whatever, the Affirming Pentecostal Churches International, APCI, which was that experience of Christianity, but affirming and welcoming of same-gender loving people. Pretty radical concept, really.
Wow.
And so he helped found that and helped lead that for another 6 or 7 years. I think it's not my story to tell, but you know, we all on our faith journeys have a little crisis of faith, have questions and doubts and whatever. P.S. He sort of re-embraced a life of active faith at Sunshine Cathedral. We're so happy, and he is now.
Yes.
Oh, and you see why.
Yeah. Praise the Lord.
Well, I mean, obviously.
Tony
you
for
will be.
Jesus, stay for the buzz. And then he is now finishing up a graduate degree in mental health counseling.
One more class.
One more class. He is
Yeah.
a substance abuse counselor and advocate, and soon to be a licensed clinician. So big story about a person. And so that's why he's here, because he's got a lot to contribute, and from an experience that maybe not a lot of us have had. So it's another Christian experience, and also some clinical insights, which is useful on this program sometimes. So that's who Kevin is. Welcome.
I brought my
Kevin.
pipe for that. Just
And you brought the pipe.
And Kevin,
Yes.
your husband is watching.
Oh, good.
He's
Hola,
watching
Miguel. Hola.
Hola, Miguel.
Nice. All right, so this is how this works. We have a queue of questions, some of them from the panelists, some of them from our watchers, some of them just come to us randomly. We put, oh, that's a good question. Put that in the queue. And so we have a bunch of questions. Our panelists read those questions. We answer it on the spot. But also, while this is happening, you can type in questions. And if we don't get to it, we add it to the queue. We will one day, in the fullness of time, get to it. But maybe tonight. So go ahead and type in your question. Tito will moderate that, make sure we see that and deal with that. But so that's how this works. And I call on people and then they choose the question. I don't know what they're going to ask. And so let's start, since this program is called Sam and Friends. Let's have Sam ask us our first question.
Okay, well, just since you did that, I'm gonna ask this question. So you sometimes refer to the current time as the apocalypse. Are you joking? If so, should you joke like that? Or do you really think this is an apocalyptic time? And what does that even mean?
I thought you got one question. That's like 16.
16, right?
Well, I didn't write the question. I just
And
asked
it's
it.
true. It's true. I have said something about, this, that, and the other during this apocalypse or whatever. And apocalypse, just in general banter, usually means something dystopian, like the end of an era. If your factory closed down and you had to lay off all your workers, they might describe that as being apocalyptic. If there was a virus that swept the world and shut down entire communities, that might be considered apocalyptic. And so, or if some sort of a political administration came into power that, seemed to trample on the rights of minorities or circle a lot of strife and conflict and hatred, that might be considered apocalyptic. So apocalyptic, in just general conversation, sort of means the end of an era or the end of something being healthy and vibrant. It kind of means disaster or a dystopian experience. But now, what we in the Bible consider the apocalyptic literature, most famously, that includes Daniel and Ezekiel and parts of Matthew, but most famously, the apocalyptic literature, we think of Revelation. Well, what is a revelation? Revelation reveals something. And so also when I am talking about an apocalypse, I'm talking about something that's being revealed. And so if you think, oh, everybody's full of hate or violence or there's all this chaos, so that's apocalyptic. Well, it's also revealing something that we may not have noticed, like that we're full of hate and chaos and bigotry or whatever. So something is being revealed. And so apocalypse is, they are dramatic change. They're sort of scary change. Maybe there's sudden change, but they also reveal something. And if we will notice the revelation, if we will notice what's being revealed, we can work with that, and something good can come out of it. There might when we're knee deep in a room full of poop, we might find that somewhere in there is a pony. You know, there's a pony here somewhere. So when I say apocalypse, I'm using it. I'm not joking really, but I am probably speaking metaphorically, as I think the writers of apocalyptic literature were. Apocalyptic literature was usually in response to political realities. It's always for the day at hand. It's not really a prediction of what some terrible thing is going to happen in 1,000 years. Who would care? So it's not a roadmap to find out what's going to be terrible. It is a way of addressing what is terrible and trying to reveal reasons to be hopeful in spite of that. So no, when I say apocalypse, I mean it, but I may not mean what you thought I meant when you thought I meant it. So it's language for when something is sort of overwhelming, and if we look, we'll probably find that it's also revealing something that can be helpful.
So it's like an apocalypse instead of the apocalypse, because I always thought of the apocalypse as like a thing instead of maybe like a period of time or a sort of period of change or that kind of thing.
Well, there's a Christian myth, and it's taken more or less seriously depending on your branch of Christianity. But there's a Christian myth that there is a sort of predetermined and the apocalypse. That there's a big one, and it's predetermined. Here are the signs, so you'll know it's coming, which sort of defeats the whole purpose of having one, I think. But anyway, here are the signs that you'll know it's coming. And everyone who's ever guessed always got it wrong, but we keep guessing. So there's a whole sort of school of thought about that. And that's not how I ever use that phrase or any phrase. So when I say, as we navigate the apocalypse, I mean the challenging time at hand. I certainly don't mean that, something sci-fi and weird, is going to happen any moment now. No, I mean that this is an end. People say this is an end of certain norms or an end of decency or an end to the way people have negotiated this, that when you have an end of the way it's been, when you have the end of the world as you've always known it, then a new world is born. And so the apocalypse is followed by a new heaven and a new earth. But these are literary images, they're metaphorical, and they will be applicable more times than one, I promise.
And I think the groups, I think some of the groups who've always used that language, and they predict the end of the world is going to happen, and then when it doesn't happen, there's always a way that they re-justify. Oh well, that's not what really was supposed to happen. This is what happened. So I think it's one of those words that we have to unpack and reclaim in a different kind of way, like we do at Sunshine Cathedral.
Yes, it's interesting that Mark uses some apocalyptic imagery. Oh, he said it. He said it. Oh, God, I'm kidding. Trust. I'm drinking it all. In Mark, which is the oldest gospel, there is a lot of apocalyptic imagery. And it's interesting that apocalyptic, the end is here, the end is coming, that it's all over, that language is used in the gospel that was written in response to Jerusalem and its temple being destroyed. The world where you were expected to and could make pilgrimages to an active temple, worship in the temple, make sacrifices in the temple. The world that knew that scenario with that temple ended in Mark's time. And so you see a lot of apocalyptic imagery in Mark's writing. And that changed the world. That changed the way people looked at time after that. And so you also see it in Matthew, who's writing after Mark. And so I know Matthew comes first in the thing, but that's not when it was written. And so you see, instead of looking for some future thing, if we just notice what was happening when they were writing, it makes a lot of sense. The same thing with the book of Revelation, where 666 is some creepy magic number and everybody's going to have to wear it, get it tattooed. They never talk about the hell of the long lines at the tattoo parlor waiting to get your 666 tattoo. But there's these, you get, and then you got to show your tattoo to, be able to buy anything at the Publix or pick up your dry cleaning or whatever. And it's kind of a silly story until you realize that this is written about the time of the Emperor Nero, and that Nero Caesar's name, Nero Caesar, in Greek and Aramaic and in Latin, those languages, the letters have numeric value, that in those languages, Nero Caesar's name amounts to 666. So, and the beast, that has the wounded head that comes back to life. There was, from our history books, we know that that there was a rumor that Nero had faked his suicide. You know, he did kill himself. He stabbed himself in the throat. And there was a rumor that he had faked his suicide and was going to come back to power. So there's this monster with the wounded head that resurrects and comes back to power. And so it's much more about what is happening rather than predicting what may happen. Apocalyptic literature is creative, artistic ways of describing the pain people are currently experiencing. And that's how I use it. So when things are, you know, overwhelming or terrible or a big, massive change about, you know, how we even, I mean, this is part of that. We didn't decide, oh, we're just gonna have a lot of talk shows and religious education programs on the internet. Let's become like an internet TV thing. Let's, you know, that we couldn't come to church. We couldn't gather in groups. And so this was a response to the world as we know it ending, but we finding a new opportunity revealed and seizing upon that opportunity. So I do use apocalypse a little differently than you may have assumed, but I think I use it pretty in line with the way it was meant to be used.
Darrell, there's a follow-up question on the live view here. It says, you don't think the world will eventually end? It is a living thing and all things do die.
Yeah, even the sun will eventually give out. I don't think that anything in any of our sacred literature is a roadmap to when or how that's going to happen.
It's a great way to get people into the altar and give more money by saying this type of stuff.
The one thing I haven't tried.
If you want to use fear as a tactic.
Yeah, we gave that up though.
One time I was with an elderly preacher and he said, look at that guy. He's pre-tribulation. He's post-tribulation. He's mid-tribulation. And see that guy over there smiling real big? He quit studying apocalyptic literature years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, people have got it worked out. You know, who's gonna escape it? Who's gonna endure it? Who, you know, all this. And I think that's escapist. I think that keeps us from dealing with the issues at hand. So there's enough scary stuff. Let's just deal with that instead of worrying about what future scary stuff may happen. There'll be scary stuff in the future too, and hopefully we'll be present to that and, you know, fix it. So or at least figure out how to cope with it. So Dennis, since Sam's question took half our time, thank you very much, Sam.
You said we could rename the show Sam and Friends. I'm just saying.
That's true. That's true. So Dennis, who remains the chair of the Sunshine Cathedral Board of Directors.
Woohoo!
The longest running chair ever.
Give me a question.
All right. Well, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do the dirty one. Everybody's like, what?
It's dirty one.
So doesn't the Bible say slaves obey your masters? I mean, WTF. I quote, that was not my question, first of all. But you know what?
Yeah.
Can I throw something in there real quick before you answer? Because I read that question and I'm like, how would I answer that question? I'm like, you know what? The Bible says a lot of things. It says donkeys and snakes talk. Mm-hmm. It says that people don't die. They just start floating up into the clouds. It says a lot of things. So why are we picking this particular passage to ask about? That was kind of I was like, interesting. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, the people who used that in antebellum times, the people who used that did so to their advantage.
Right.
They got free labor. They got to kidnap people and sell and tear people's children away from them and sell them and treat them abysmally and brutalize them. And they had a Bible verse that said it was okay. And so they didn't have to trouble their conscience at all because they had given an idol. The Bible is what they had become for them. They'd given an idol the power to give them permission to do what is impermissible. And so the people who used that verse and liked those verses and used that verse became very wealthy from being able to sell those verses. So those are, by the way, in the Bible, both Testaments, about how to in war take slaves, how to treat your slaves. Usually some degree of benevolence is expected, in those things. You're not supposed to enslave your own people, only your enemies, there's that. I think there were restrictions on how harsh you could be. If you accidentally killed or injured somebody else's slave, you owed them a replacement. I mean, there were rules. It's pretty ghastly. In fact, there's an entire, it's tiny, thank God, it's just a little letter, but there's an entire book of the New Testament that is Paul, a slave ran away, escaped, and got to Paul for safety, and Paul sends him back. And the whole letter is, I'm sending your slave back, don't be mean to him. That's the letter. That's the letter of Philemon in the Bible. It should only ever be used to line bird cages. I despise that book of the Bible, even though it was in a culture where slavery was a given. Like, no one questioned if war was good or bad. They just wondered what was the moral way to make war. And that was the same thing with slavery. No one questioned. I mean, slaves were, rich people had slaves. Powerful people took slaves. That's the way of the world. So their question was, well, how do you treat your slaves then? But that was cultural and not divine dictates. And so you do see some things talking about slavery and not condemning it. Jesus himself never uttered a word of condemnation, probably because he was a poor person. He probably never even thought about it. Like, the idea of having or owning slave, like that probably never even crossed his mind. He did seem to take offense when marginalized people were mistreated. He spoke up for children. He spoke up for women. He spoke up for the people who were so ill they were considered untouchable. He spoke up for the mentally ill, demon possessed. So I think he would have gotten around to maybe also caring about enslaved people, but enslaved people could own things. Sometimes slaves had slaves. You could buy your way out of slavery. You could be a scholar. You could have high positions in a royal court, but still be a slave. So it was not the chattel slavery that we had in the American South, first of all. And so second of all, and sometimes people would enter into slavery voluntarily. If I was desperately poor, I might sell myself into slavery to feed my family or to buy myself out of debt. So my body was a commodity. And so it was just a different system. It was the world at the time, still ghastly. Still, we don't, looking back, we don't say that was a good thing. But the people who used those handful of verses to justify chattel slavery in the antebellum South, they did it for their own enrichment. They did it by dehumanizing people from Africa and their descendants. And the attitudes of entitlement for white people and of the secondary nature of people called the attitudes that were generated at that time plague us still. They're in some of our laws. They are in some of our public monuments that have been meant to be celebrated. They are in our language. They are in the privilege that some people enjoy without earning, and that other people are denied while working hard. And so the terrible, 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 sinful, abusive reality of chattel slavery in the antebellum South not only was evil in its time, but it is an evil that has had generational consequences that we see to this day, and our denial of it, and our sweeping it under the rug, only keeps it going. So yes, those words are found in the Bible, and like you said, there are other words in the Bible, like, oh, look at that snake chatting us up, or look, let me send your slave back home to you, but don't be mean to him. There's a lot of stuff. Here's a 90-year-old woman having a baby, because that happens. So there's a lot of things, and we have to think critically and we have to think intelligently. Faith doesn't mean being ridiculous. Faith means that our stories get us to trust the goodness of God. Faith is trust. And so our stories are meant to help us trust goodness. They aren't supposed to make us believe things that aren't good and that keep us from even trying to be good. If you think for 2 seconds that slavery is justifiable, then that has not contributed to your goodness or to goodness in the world. So yeah, it's in there. And yes, we have used that in abysmal ways. And if you think it's abysmal, if you think slaves obey your master, if you think that is a bad thing, and surely to Christ you do, if you do, then you have to ask yourself, what else did they get wrong? Same thing with the gay stuff. Once we deconstruct it, okay, you were sold a lot of self-hatred or hatred of others. We deconstruct that, we get rid of that, but then you've got to ask yourself, what else did they get wrong? Either the people who wrote it or the people who interpreted it and taught it to us. What else did they get wrong? I promise it's not a short list. Reverend Margarita, ask us something. Something that doesn't get me all wound up.
All right, let's see. How about
I was going for the jugular.
so God sends messages through animals in the Bible stories. Do you think that God sends us messages through animals, even if they don't talk, and the natural world?
There's a chatty snake in one of the creation myths who gets a really bad rap from it all because the snake tells the truth. The snake says, if you eat this, if you eat this fig, you won't die. And they eat the fig and they don't die. So not only is he he's not even, he's just the guy, he's just the snake talking and not even being terribly mendacious about anything. And historically, the snake is a snake. I mean, it wasn't until late first century, I think, that people started reading back into that snake represented something else. But the snake talks. And then later, there was a prophet Balaam, and he has a donkey that he rides, and the donkey can see angels. He can't, but the donkey can. And when they encounter an angel, the donkey puts on the brakes, not going to mess with an angel, especially since this angel is armed, has a big sword. Balaam doesn't see the sword either. And so the donkey's like, no, no, no. And Balaam beats the donkey, does everything to try to get her to keep going forward. She won't go. And finally, the donkey says, why are you treating me this way? And of course, he answers her. He's like, well, because you're not a... Dude, she spoke, right? And he doesn't even blink, right, in the story. So the chatty snake and the defiant donkey, these are fables. Whenever you have talking animals and there's a moral in the story, and they're usually pretty humorous, those are fables. And they're powerful, and they're part of literature, and they can be part of sacred literature. But of course, snakes and donkeys are not even Francis the Talking Mule. That too is a fictional story, right? So they aren't really known to be great conversationalists, and there's not a spot where God is not. I
Certainly
swear,
at the Sunshine Cathedral.
especially at the Sunshine Cathedral, that's a twofer.
I was hoping that word would come up soon.
So we kind of on a dry run there.
Just getting dry mouth, just inject it in there, like Tourette's. Sunshine Cathedral. Oh wait, that was the real one.
That was okay.
So and there's not a spot where God is not. And so song lyrics, cloud formations, rose bushes, dogs, cats, goldfish, a friend's smile, a divine message of hope and healing and encouragement can come from anywhere because God is everywhere. So I've certainly had cats and dogs, pets in my life, communicate love and generosity and trust and beauty to me. And those are all synonyms for God. So yeah, I think God speaks or is communicated through or is represented by, animals can be channels through which God's love flows, of course. And they can also do that without speaking my language, Although Bella, our dog, she's got to know 50, 60, 100 words. She knows words. I've never heard her say them, though. So, but she's smart and she's prophetic and anointed. But she just doesn't really talk. So there you have it. Tara, you specifically said, I want to ask a question. So
I did.
You did? No, remember? Not just now, but earlier.
Oh yeah, I do. I liked this one that's in the queue. Oh, should I ask this one? No. Okay. I like this one. I think it was asked in the chat last week. I pray and sometimes ask God questions needing answers, and I don't feel like I get answers. Is there a way to pray to get clearer answers? Am I doing something wrong?
Yes.
I 100% know that it's not the question you were going to ask.
Okay, do you want me to ask a different one?
Well, you put it out there. We got to deal with it now.
Okay.
You
Go
can
for it.
go
Go
back.
for it, Tara.
Completely squandered your chance. I don't even remember what the question was. I remember it didn't sound like that though. Okay, so
That's not of
I
the
I can ask
spirit.
a different one. We can save that one for next week.
I hope somebody else asked the question you wanted because you squandered your chance. Grace is a beautiful concept, but has no application on this show. So you did it, and now we got to deal with it. No, plus, it's a really great question. Here's the thing. And I'm going to try to be short with this because this is really one for Margarita to probably deal with. But we get in our heads and we get in our way, and just like I said, Bella is for me sometimes the look or the voice of God. The other day was the strangest thing. She hugs me all the time. She comes to my life, she hugs me. But she did something special and extra the other day with her head. Like she put it down low, and it was just the most sweetest thing. I don't know what she did. She doesn't normally do it. I don't think she's done it since. But she was responding to something in the moment, and I was super blessed by that. Now, if I'm not open to seeing that, or if I am not, if I'm not sort of leaning in the direction of interpreting those kinds of things mystically or poetically or metaphysically, then all I got was, a nice moment with my dog. So I think we miss a lot of things just because of our attitude or our headspace or what we're focused on or what we're not looking for. And so I don't know what this person is praying for. I don't know what they expect, but I would be very surprised if there aren't opportunities, if there aren't hints, if there aren't flashes of insight or hope, if there's not a line in a book or a word in a song, or something spoken on television in an old movie that isn't exactly what they're looking for, but they're not looking for it in ways other than a booming voice from a cloud maybe, or whatever. So I don't know what they're praying for. I don't know what they mean by answer. If answer means I'm praying for my disease to go in remission, and you think the answer is it goes into remission, well, okay, keep going to your doctor, keep hoping, keep praying, we'll pray with you. But if the answer is, if it's a question, like, should I apply for this job, or should I stay in this neighborhood? And you're waiting to audibly hear, no, get out now, or whatever. That may not be how it happens. But I think that when we pray, we aren't going to the teller window and giving a thing and getting a thing back. I think what we're doing is we are remembering our oneness with God, that God is the source and substance of all that is, that God is omnipresent, that God is love, is complete goodness, that is everlasting, and I'm part of that. So whatever the question is, that's the answer. That God is good, God is omnipresent, and I'm part of that presence. That's the answer. And so, and because of that, I probably am able to get through this, or I am probably able to help someone else get through this, or I'm able to learn from this, or grow from this, or overcome this, or something. I got this because I am an expression. I am a God drop. I love Cindy Lippert calls us God drops. That in the ocean of God, we are each a drop in the ocean, and whatever the ocean is completely in the drop. Now, the drop isn't obviously the whole ocean, but all that the ocean is in the drop. And so if the ocean is God, she says, we are God drops. That's the answer. That's the answer to the prayer. Help me not be afraid. Well, there's nothing to be afraid of because you're a God drop. Help me forgive. You can forgive. You absolutely can because you're a God drop. So whatever you're looking for, the answer is there's not a spot where God is not. The answer is you are God's miracle and not God's mistake. And then it's sort of up to us to figure out how to apply that to the situation at hand. Those are my thoughts, but we actually have a for real spiritual director. So Margarita, what would you add to that?
You did great. Of course. But I think what I would add really is that, whenever we ask for something, like you said, sometimes we have in mind how that needs to happen. Like, I want to hear a voice, I want to see an angel, I want to see, and not necessarily that. I mean, that's fine. Some people do get the experience, the mystical experience, and great. But, it sometimes comes in different ways for different people, and in subtle ways. And if you have a form of what you want, maybe you're not letting God grace really bless you the way that it needs to be, because we try to play God most of the time, thinking that we know better than God. And if we're really trusting that the presence is with us, then I think whatever choice that we make without fear or without doubt, that's when we're getting the answer. If there's fear or doubt, then we are in the middle of the answer.
This was years ago, 20, 30 years. This was forever ago. I was in one ministry, I was a staff minister, and I was being recruited to join another staff. And I was happy where I was, but I was also flattered to be courted. And I had a good job, but that was also a good job. And that good job actually paid more. But I didn't know, and so I asked a spiritual mentor about it. I'm like, I'm praying, but I still have just confusion, blah, blah, blah. And he actually said to me, you pray about it, you make your best decision, and it will either be the right thing, or if it's not the right thing, God will make it right. And so you do your best and leave it up for God to do the rest. And making it right either means I get happy, or I find another thing there, or I come back. I mean, there's a way. And so he said, pray, do your best, and it will either be right or God will make it right. And I think that it got me through that. It did get me through that. And that led from one thing to another thing, and here I am now. So maybe. Which
church are you at now, Darrell?
It's called the Sunshine Cathedral.
Oh!
For 14 years and counting.
She didn't know.
So
I saw an opportunity.
Yes. So I hope that's helpful. I mean, I hope we're not being. I mean, we always have a good time and laugh and stuff. So, but I hope we don't come across as flip, because someone is probably really struggling with this, like we all have. But
actually, the person that asked the question, Brian Johnson, thanked you for the answer. He says it was a wonderful response. Thank you.
And
so
that was his question.
It was his question. He said.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
well,
you
I'm glad.
helped him.
Very good. All right, I think we have time for one more. Let's have Kevin Conkle, our guest tonight, be our anchor.
Oh, you know what? I don't really know what to do. I was going to do the pearl thing, but then I didn't want to take from Pastor Robert's pearls there he's got going on.
Oh, that's right, Robert. We'll end with Robert's pearls. You're not
There
going
you
to
go.
pearl.
No,
So give me
Kevin,
something
be
else.
blessed
Then.
by the pearls. Go for the pearls.
Okay, so we'll do the alien one. How about that? Is that too much?
No, go ahead. If that's in the queue, we get to deal with it.
All right. Are there other sentient beings in the universe? Are they also part of God's fold? And does that mean there could be infinite other species in heaven?
That's really about 3 questions.
Sorry, I didn't write it.
Right. And I think the answers are I don't know, yes, and yes. Because no, I mean, are there other? Maybe, probably. I mean, I can't prove it one way or the other. Parapsychology and all that. That's its own field. It's not mine. But I've got a friend who is a microbiologist, and I said, "Do you see evolution even still? I mean, yeah, we know we evolved to get here, but do you see evidence of it in things you haven't already seen in textbooks or before?" She's like, "Oh yes, we see it every day. You dig a hole somewhere in a swamp, and you see a new thing emerging." And so if life is so ubiquitous here, why would it be contained to this little sphere? So, and of course, not all life is what we would call intelligent life. Not all life gets thumbs and voices and, whatever, but we did. And I know we like to think we're super special and unique, but I don't know. I don't know. So if it happened once, and if we want to, of course we play with scripture. You should never torment yourself with scripture, but we can say from scripture that God is constant. That God. In one sense, God doesn't change. In another sense, God is change. God said this, and then something else happened. God said this, and then something else. That the whole creation story is a story of just one change happening after another. But so God is change. But if you say, well, God changes not. God's compassions, they fail not. Well, okay. Well, then God is in the creation business, and if God created us, maybe God is creating other groups, other species also. So any way you look at it, it is certainly possible. And if it has happened, then of course they're part of God's universe, they're part of God's heaven, they're part of God's plan. So the answer is I don't know if there are others, but if there are others, they are part of the sacred universe. They are part of God's plan. They are God's miracle and not God's mistake. And it could be that this is happening on planet after planet after planet, and these planets are being governed by some of Tara's friends. So
Yeah, I was
There
gonna
you go.
say.
Yeah.
That clearly deserves our drink to that, Tara.
Thanks for that.
we kid the Mormons at the Sunshine Cathedral.
Okay, somebody gave up her own planet to be with me.
That's true.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've heard
You owe me.
stories. She wasn't getting a planet anyhow. I heard the story. There was no planet for sister. So okay, well we're about at the cutting off point, but I did hear. So Robert, do you want to have people do their final thoughts? I don't think we got a Tito question, but he'll have one for next week. Unless you had one burning. Did you have one burning to get out?
No. I just asked a quick question earlier. The follow up, but
The follow up.
Oh, okay. So do you want to ask a question, Robert, or do you want to do a round robin with people?
Let's just do a round robin and we'll wrap it up for tonight. But just before we as everyone is getting their final thought together, just a reminder, Monday through Saturday is midday prayer at noon. Also Mondays, of course, at 6 is Christians and Cocktails. Wednesday is Sharing the Chair. And this week is with the Reverend Kittrick Cherry.
Cherry, like the fruit.
Cherry.
Like food.
Yeah, Kip Cherry. There we go. Just Google her name. She's going to come a very, very interesting, very exciting person. You don't want to miss her. And then, of course, on Saturdays at 12:30 is Just a Thought with Darrell and Sydney Lippert. And, of course, we invite you to join us on Sundays at 9:30 and 10:30. 10:30 live broadcast and 9 and 10:30 in the room. And you must make reservations for that because we want you to be a part of the Sunshine Cathedral, which is the queer church here in America, the gayest and queerest church of all. So with that said, let's do round robin. And we're going to start off with Margarita. What's your final thought here?
I would say to stay connected to the one presence by actually being present with every interaction that we have and paying attention to what's going on, so we can be better to everyone that we meet and bring that one presence every time that we meet someone.
How about it, Dennis?
Oh, you're gonna throw it at me. I'm just gonna say spread love. We're all one in God. Like Darrell was saying about us being God drops in the ocean. We're just a drop in the ocean, but the ocean is in that drop. We're all part of the same ocean. So spread some love and spread some kindness.
All righty, Sam.
The Christians and Cocktails has taught me to really reclaim a lot of terms, like Tito and I talked about reclaiming queer. We're kind of inspired to do that, but I never thought that I would be reclaiming the apocalypse. And I'm feeling it. Like,
And only at the Sunshine Cathedral. can you do that.
What about it, Tito?
So with that question before about praying and getting answers, I just think there's no wrong way to pray. And I think everybody gets answers in different ways. Some people get it as a sign, some people get it as an emotion or a feeling. So yeah, there's no wrong way to pray, and the signs come in different shapes and forms.
All right,
No
Tari.
true words have ever been spoken.
Tari, you're going to sing yours for us, right?
No. Come tune in on Sunday and I'll sing a thought for you.
But just for you.
A couple times tonight.
Did you spell that THOT?
Oh,
Stop it!
Wow.
Do you want my final thought or not?
Please, with pearls
Get
on.
it out, man. Get it out.
It's a good one. So a couple times tonight we talked about being open to interpret the divine messages. And, you know, a lot of times we're looking at this whole apocalypse that we're living through, and we just see the negative, we see the bad. And I feel kind of guilty, but I've had some really positive moments during this quarantine. You know, I've been planting flowers, I've been playing the piano, I've been forced to slow down. I feel rested, and I'm so thankful that I still have a job and that I still have my family and friends, and no one that I know has been infected. So that's wonderful. But I think this has been good training for me moving forward to be able to be more open to interpret those divine messages. So
Nice.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bring it on home for us, Kevin. What you got for us, buddy?
I just gotta say this is the best doggone Bible study I ever been a part of in all my years. I will say this: I was an extreme literalist, and then of course I came out as gay and had to modify my theology, obviously, and then I became an outright atheist for a while, and I talked with Pastor Durrell because I just didn't feel comfortable there either. I sat down one day with a big envelope full of questions, and he has helped restore my faith by looking at the Bible from another angle and looking at it a different perspective. And it makes sense. It's rational, it's logical, it's practical, it's anointed, it's spiritual. I just thank God for Sunshine Cathedral and for our pastors who do such an incredible job. I'm glad to be a part of our church. I love you all.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, thank you for being with us. And just before Darrell wraps all up for us, again, thank everyone for being with us tonight, because at Sunshine Cathedral, we are America's queer church for all. And we're glad that you have found us, however you come across us. And we hope that you continue to join us and support us as we move forward. Darrell, final thought.
Just ditto what everyone said. Just those were some of the best final thoughts I think we've had. And I'm gonna play Tito, because Tito always says, "Well, yeah, I agree with Sam." Well, I agree with Tito tonight that that you can't get it wrong. You can't get it wrong. I had a priest one time tell me to try to pray is to pray, and then, you know, because there's not a spot where God is not. God's getting the prayer, and so you can't get it wrong. And even if there were no God, even if I had a crisis faith where I'm like, there's no God, I wouldn't stop praying. I think there's value in prayer if nobody's listening. It's still energy. It's still looking for hope. It's still being grateful for the good. It's still being determined that there are possibilities. And if there is no God, that's all still good stuff. And if there is a God, then that's good stuff turbocharged. So you can't get it wrong. It's good, better, and best. So what a great panel. I love these talks we have every Monday. These guys probably wouldn't even spend any time with me if not for this show, but because of this show, we get to hang out and it's fun, and we get to talk about important stuff. No, that's not. But I love this show, and I love that we're able to share our conversation really globally, because if we come up with these questions, people ask these questions, other people have these questions, and it's okay to talk about them. Even if we don't come up with an answer you liked, there was still some freedom and some joy in discussing it. So here's the Sunshine Cathedral.
All right, Sunshine
Amen.
Cathedral.
Cheers.
America's queer church for all. Take care, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you on our next broadcast event. Thank you. Have a good night. Thanks, Kevin.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.